Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to call to order the McKinney chapter Sons of the American Revolution meeting. Today is May 16th of 2004. At this time, I would like to ask Paul Andreessen, our chaplain, to lead us in prayer.
That's right. Almighty God, be with the members of the Sons of the American Revolution, that we may be alive to the opportunities and the responsibilities of these times. Save us from all complacency and from fear of new ways. Inspire our minds with the vision of a new world where there is a rebirth of freedom. Help us to work and pray until thy will is done on this earth as it is done in heaven. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
And as you may have noticed, we have a wonderful group of firefighters here with us. Thank you all for being here this evening. Please join me now on the pledge of the United States of America. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Also, Peter Ford, our treasurer, please lead us to the Texas pledge.
Yes, sir. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
And our SAR pledge, Balaj reading.
Yes.
We, the descendants of the heroes of the American Revolution, who by their sacrifices established the United States of America, reaffirm our faith in the principles of liberty and our constitutional republic, and solemnly declare ourselves to defend them against every foe.
And our mission statement, Bill Taylor.
The Sons of the American Revolution. Honor the revolutionary war of independence. While promoting patriotism, serving our communities, educating and inspiring future generations about the founding principles of our country.
Please be seated. At this time, we'll have our self-introductions.
Gerald Taylor, person of Texas.
Paul Andreessen, member of this chapter.
Nathan and Wanda White.
I'm Elena Cho.
We're the Cho family from Frisco.
George Bradford, McKinney chapter, my wife Joy, with the liaison, John Hampton chapter.
Tom Milson, McKinney chapter. Harry sign and Lydia sign, we're just guests, thank you. I'm John Ray, McKinney chapter.
Kevin Ennis, McKinney, Plano chapters.
Bill Watts, McKinney, Plano, like the others, Dallas.
Tom Van Boston, Dallas, McKinney, Plano, and a lot more.
Ed Wilson, Edmund Terrell, and McKinney.
Wes Brown, history teacher with Lane. Tracy Founders, McKinney, Dallas, Red River, and honored to be your state president.
Peter Ford, McKinney chapter, I'm the treasurer here. Carl Powers, honorary member of the McKinney chapter. You are.
Deputy Secretary, and online we have Tom Foster.
Woody Wall, Middle Elm, again. Kevin Simpson from Pottsboro, I guess.
Larry Simpson.
Sherman.
Yes. Tom Crone from Sherman, Texas, I'm a guest.
John Steve, McKinney Fire Marshal.
I was wild listening.
Bill Tracy.
Jim Lloyd, McKinney, Fire Marshal.
Chris Mussel, my wife Amanda, McKinney SAR.
Wonderful, thank you. Our program, Tom, you can.
Okay, thank you. First, thank you everyone for being here today. It's a wonderful turnout. Thank you to all our guests, and all the guests that Carl brought. Thank you. Get our numbers up this way, Carl. Thank you so much. Anyway, so, I'm supposed to be up here introducing Carl Flowers, but Carl is, we made a special title for him. He's a special friend of the chapter, okay? He's a great guy. He's been with us a lot, talking about various things. He talked to one of our state board of managers meetings here a year or two ago, I guess. And just an outstanding guy. I keep trying to figure out how I'm going to get him in the SAR, but he keeps telling me all of his blood relatives came over in the bubble, but in the early 1908. And so we're still looking hard, though. I think there may be a Polish connection or something with the Polish
With Pulaski or
Pulaski
yeah,
that came over here and fought with us. If we can make that connection, got a great bloodline. But one way or another, we're trying to get him in. So without further ado, you don't want to hear me, you want to hear him. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him tell you his story.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening.
We need to sit down or
Please. Okay. Welcome to another glorious day in this sweet, sweet land of liberty, land that we love, and especially the great state of Texas. For those of you who are guests today, the fire department and the Cho family, I apologize that they're making you listen to me first before getting to your part of the program. I'll try to make it interesting. I do talk about the untold stories of American independence. I started this back in 1976, 50 years ago, almost, when we had the bicentennial. We are now approaching in 2 years the semi-quincentennial. That's the 250th anniversary of the United States coming up. And I'm just a little vexed at the fact that people aren't studying history more and don't understand why this country was founded and how it's founded. So we'll talk about that tonight. But first, I have, since I have some friends, I think, in the audience, I found something interesting I thought you'd like to see. This, of course, is Mount Rushmore. Has anybody ever visited Mount Rushmore? Yeah, so it's a wonderful place. 4 of our greatest presidents are on Mount Rushmore. But this is what Mount Rushmore looked like before 1927. Okay, so that's when they started construction. It was called Mount Rushmore, but the Native Americans called it the 6 grandfathers. So apparently they looked at the 6 grandfathers there. So we could say this is its natural beauty was unprecedented. And many people probably don't know that's what the front looks like, but you probably didn't wonder what's it look like in the back. Yeah. Just no. All right, everything I say from now on is serious. I just want to get you laughing a little bit and try. Tonight we're going to talk about the 250th anniversary. Coming up in about 8 weeks, we're going to celebrate the 248th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And it's our founding document. It's a document that the founders and the writers of the Constitution said that the Constitution was based on the Declaration of Independence. So it's an integral part of our governance. And so I thought I would talk to you about some of the things that happened. So we call this Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. I handed out Tom is handing out some sheets there of notes. There's nothing for you to write down, and you don't really have to follow along if you don't want to. You can just take that home and give it to somebody. I'm serious, give it to somebody. Down the left-hand side, though, is yours. Mine has a blue outline on it, yours doesn't. That's just because it's different for you. Down the left-hand side is the timeline of the entire American Revolution, and we're talking about the area between the 2 red lines, between the Second Continental Congress there on May 10th of 1775 and July 4th, 1776. So that's the area of time that we're talking about there. So, the Declaration of Independence was something that never before happened in the history of the world. It was the first time, the first establishment of a country or a government that was governed by the consent of the people. Prior to all this time, the government decided what happened. In our case, the people decide what happens. So today, we don't work for the government works for us. That's the way it works in the United States, and that's what it says in the Declaration. The concept is called freedom. And never before was a country founded on the basis of freedom. This is the famous Trumbull painting. Now, a lot of our history, they didn't have photographs in those days. So this painting was made in 1817, which is just about 40 years after the signing of the Declaration. And so Trumbull talked to people who were there, and he had painted some of the people who were there. So this is kind of how they assumed it took place. And what's happening here is the Committee of Five, who we'll talk about in a second, are presenting the Declaration to the President of the Congress. At that time was John Hancock. But how did this happen? How did we come to this point where they put this declaration out? You first of all, you got to know your founders. Okay, so you will hear terms in history called the founders, the signers, and the framers. Who are we talking about? Founders are basically any man or woman who was influential during the founding period. And the founding period could be any time from the early 1700s. Some people say up to the Civil War. So some people will even call Abraham Lincoln was one of the founders because he had something to do with molding the country. So the founders is a very general term. The signers we're going to talk about are the 56 individual men who signed the Declaration of Independence and were there that day when it was signed. The framers then, about 15 years later, were the 70 delegates to the Constitutional Convention in 1787, and they were the ones who contributed to writing it, and most of them signed it. Not all of them signed it, but that's another topic. So those are the founders were. Now, who were they really? They were people from all walks of life, just like the people in this room. They didn't actually have fire departments in those days, but Ben Franklin started the first fire department. But there are people from all walks of life, just like we are today. There were no professional politicians in those days, or professional governors, or even in our country, professional soldiers at the time. So these are all men who came together to make something better of the 13 colonies. Where were they educated? This is pretty interesting. There were 3 major schools. 39 of the 56 signers, 39 of them went to one of these 3 schools: Harvard University, Princeton University, or William and Mary College in Williamsburg. All 3 of these colleges were actually divinity schools. If you wanted to be a lawyer or you wanted to be a minister, which were 2 of the best occupations in the colonies at the time, you went to one of these schools. 39 of the signers went to these, so 39 of the signers graduated with what today we would call a seminary degree. Okay, you didn't hear that in your history books, did you? Okay, they all studied to be ministers. They all studied to be lawyers, so that they had the same education. It's called a classical education, equivalent to a seminary degree today. What did they read? Okay, well, one of the books they read a lot of was Blackstone's commentary. So Blackstone was a person in the earlier 1700s that in England that wrote about law, and he commented about law, and all Western law was based on a book called the Bible. Okay, they also read John Locke, the philosopher, who also based a lot of his writings on the Bible. And about 40 years ago, the University of Houston did a study, and they examined not just the official government writings and the official writings of our country, but all of the personal correspondence of all of the signers. And they found out that they quoted 4 times more from the Bible than from any other document. Now, that means they had a biblical worldview. As recently as 1940, and I don't have it with me, it's at home in Arkansas, but I have a book, a reprint of a textbook for the city of Dallas school system in the 1940s, which is the Bible, because you learned to read by reading the Bible, even in 1940 in the city of Dallas. That was one of the most prominent books in the world at the time, and they all studied it. They all knew it. They had a worldview based on what they learned there. I'm not here today to tell you that they were all Christian, or that we formed a Christian country, but they based the foundation of the country on the principles they learned in that book. And we'll take a look at that as we go through it. Now, Alexander Hamilton was not he's one of the founders, but he's not a signer, because during the war, he was George Washington's aide. He was a military agent in the war, but later on, he was involved in the writing of the Constitution. And he said that in all dispositions, in all discussions like this, there are certain primary truths that you base things on, and all subsequent reasoning follows these truths. They call it the first principles. What are the first principles of the founders? The first principles are this: the rights that we have today are granted by God. Government doesn't give us the right, the Supreme Court doesn't give us the right, we have the right already, and the government protects that right. We have the right to live freely, we have the right to do whatever we want to do, we have the right to protect ourselves, and government's job is to protect that right. It doesn't grant us the right because God already gave us the right. Government by consent of the governed. We choose who leads us, and if we don't like who's leading us, we choose somebody else, and you see that happening every 2 to 4 years. They believed in the rule of law. See, the kings, various kings around the world, they would change the law based on how they felt when they got up. They said, I don't like what Peter's doing today, we're gonna write a law against that and put Peter in jail. That's the rule of man, where man can change the rules. The founders said, we don't like that. We're gonna establish laws and everyone's gonna follow those laws. They said to make this work, to have representative government, where we send people to Austin, we send people to Washington, D.C. In order to make that work, you better send people who have virtue and morality, because they're making decisions. You just sent somebody to Austin, they're gonna make decisions about your life. They better be people of virtue. What we don't use, there was a word frequently used by the founders. Today we would call it character or integrity. They better have some character or integrity, they better be honest people. And they better have a sense of right and wrong, right? So George's character, integrity, morality, a concept of right and wrong. Because if you send people who don't believe in right and wrong, or don't have any character, they're gonna change the rules. All right, now, let's look at the timeline. The French and Indian War was fought because the French were coming around down behind the Allegheny Mountains from Mexico, not Mexico, Canada. And they were, the colonists, or the king believed he had everything from the Atlantic seaboard to the Mississippi River. But the French were coming down, those of you who grew up in Illinois or Indiana, you know the Marquette and Joliet and the explorers were coming down. So there's a war fought in the colonies to protect the rights of the king. And so it's called the French and Indian War. In the colonies, in Europe, it was called the 7 Years' War. But it was the first world war because they were fighting all over, mostly in the colonies. In order to pay for that war, King George, when he won the war, he was out of money. So he said, well, since we fought the war for the colonies, they should pay for the war. So he started raising taxes and doing things. They started occupying, they started changing the rules on the colonies for since the early 1600s had governed themselves. But all of a sudden the king said, no, we're not gonna do it that way anymore. I'm gonna give you the rules. So as a result, there were some protests. There was the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, the Intolerable Acts, where they shut down the city of Boston because of the Boston Tea Party, and they occupied it. And when they did that, the 9 or 10 of the first colonies of the 13 got together in New York, and they said, we better have a meeting about this. So it's called the First Continental Congress, 1774. They met for about 6 weeks. They said, we don't like this. Let's send a letter to the king. And they said, dear king, please stop this. Okay, this was a kind of simple petition. We don't like this. We want to be your subjects. Just change the rules here. The king didn't respond. He wasn't amused at all. So, so then you know what happened in 1775. We had the battles of Lexington and Concord because the governor general who was sent, he was the former military commander over the whole colonies in the late 1750s and the early 1760s. Then he went back to England. His name was Gage. And while he was in England, he wrote about the colonies. And one of the things he said about the colonies is, you know what the problem with the Americans are? They have too many guns. Okay. So when he's now governor in Massachusetts and he's got the quarantined city and he shut it down, he's sending troops out in the countryside to collect the gunpowder and collect the cannon. And that's when we had Lexington and Concord, the battles of Lexington and Concord. Then the Second Continental Congress met May 1st, right after that. They were already on their way to the meeting. You had the battles of Bunker Hill, Washington becomes the head of the army. They took Fort Ticonderoga and they tried to take Canada. Okay, so we didn't quite get that far. All that's going on. And before the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, what were those guys doing for a year? They're fighting up in Boston, yet they're discussing it down in Philadelphia. And one of my favorite characters of the revolution, a woman by the name of Abigail Adams, writes to her husband John at that time, and she says this: John, we have too many high-sounding words and too few actions that correspond with them. She said, we've been doing it up here for a year, you guys are still talking about it, we just signed the paper already, let's move on. Now, in fairness to the founders and to the signers, they had a lot of things to discuss. They had to raise money, they had to look for allies, they had to find munitions, they were busy with a lot of things. So it took them a while to get to this point. It took over a year before they actually sat down and started debating, do we want to be free? So on July 4th, they presented this paper. How did we get the paper? Well, we'll go back a year in 1775, Patrick Henry, the House of Burgesses was the state legislature of Virginia, if you will, that's what they called it. But the governor dissolved it because they were protesting. So they decided they just up and moved, and they met in a church in Richmond, Virginia, Baptist church, I believe, and they had their own government, okay, in spite of the governor. And that's where Patrick Henry, of course, made that famous speech a year before. He said, I'm appealing to the arms and to the God of hosts. That's all we have left. We have arms and we have God. That's all we have left. And he said, will not fight our battles alone. There's a just God that provides over the destiny of nations, who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. He said, is life so dear or peace so sweet as we purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take. As for me, give me liberty or give me death. In the audience that day, by the way, was George Washington, because he was a member of the House of Burgesses. So was Thomas Jefferson, a member of the House of Burgesses. So they were all there, heard that speech. Now they move on in May, they're at the Continental Congress. And again, people are getting frustrated, nothing's happening. So in May of the year, about 2 months before, the Virginia Convention now gets together and they say to their delegates, they say, hey, we want you to go back to the Congress and we want you to do this. Propose that to that respectable body that they declare the United Colonies free, independent states absolved from all allegiance to the king. So Virginia sends word to its delegates, propose this, put it on the table, okay? So the person who did that was Richard Henry Lee, and on June 7th, 1776, he stands up and he says, I propose, that's the handwriting, that's what it looked like in writing. He says, I propose that the United Colonies be free and independent states and follow the rules of the Virginia Convention. And an uproar arose because there were a lot of states that still didn't want to be free. They were trying to work it out with the king. So they started this great debate. The debate goes on for 2 days, June 7th and June 9th. And they're arguing and they're yelling and screaming. If you've seen some of the movies about this, you'll see the various arguments. Oddly enough, the secretary at this convention didn't take a lot of notes. So we don't know exactly what happens. What we have is the memoirs, mostly of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, who remember, but they remember 20 years ago. Do you remember what you had for breakfast 20 years ago? Anyway, on June 10th, John Hancock says, okay, enough fighting. He says, here's what I propose. I suggest we take a 3-week recess. Everybody goes back to their respective colonies and get direction from your leaders. So all the colonies that form their own little governments, get advice from them and come back prepared to vote on this proposal. Just before everybody starts splitting, John Adams really wanted independence. John Adams sent up and said, well, wait a minute. What if we all come back and decide we're going to be free? Don't you think we should have a declaration of that freedom? So how about he said, I already know what my delegation is going to tell me to do. We already know that. So he said, how about over those 3 weeks, we start working on a declaration? Okay, it's called John Adams' ploy. He got everybody to agree, okay, we'll write a declaration just in case. So they appointed a committee. Who was on the committee? There were 5 people on the committee. That's the committee of 5 standing there. We got John Adams from Massachusetts, Ben Franklin from Pennsylvania, Jefferson from Virginia, Roger Sherman from Connecticut, Robert Livingston from New York. These are the 5. They're called the committee of 5. You know at least 3 of those names. Okay, and let's talk about each one of them just for a couple minutes here. The declaration said all men, that Thomas Jefferson, of course, wrote it, right? So Jefferson wrote it. The other 5 gave their input and they're discussing it. So Jefferson wrote, all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. How did they know that? Well, they knew that because they did two things. They observed, as he said later, nature's God. So there's other phrases in the Declaration. All men are created equal, and all men are creator. The laws of nature and nature's God. They looked at nature and they said, look at the birds. They go wherever they want. Look at the bear cubs. Look at the foxes. And look how the mother fox protects their homes. So they started getting concepts from nature and from the God who created nature. And were appealing to the supreme judge of the world. See, in those days, it was just common to talk about God, so they didn't have to name him. They could use all these metaphors because everybody knew who you were talking about. And they signed up by saying we rely on divine providence. So all of that is in the Declaration. Now, who were they? John Adams. John Adams, of course, was a lawyer in Boston. At the Boston Massacre, he defended the British soldiers who shot 5 people that day, and acquitted all of them except one who was in charge. He was the delegate to both the first and second Continental Congress, or Continental Convention. He was a minister to France after the Declaration, so he went to France with Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, and they were working in Europe to raise support. He became ambassador to Great Britain after we became free and independent. John Adams had to present himself to King George, and he had to walk into the room and bow to King George, which he really hated doing. He just didn't believe in that. And then he became our first vice president and of course our second president. Okay, that's John Adams. John Adams believed about freedom. He said the right to freedom is a gift from God Almighty. It's not the power of man to deny this gift. He said you can't enslave anybody because God made us all free. This is where John and Abigail Adams lived in Quincy, Massachusetts. He was the first person to occupy the White House. So when he moved into the White House in 1799, I think it was, Washington laid the foundation, but he was already out of office when the White House was built. John Adams wrote to Abigail that night and said, I pray to heaven to bestow the best blessings on this house, and all that hereafter inherited, may none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. If you tour the White House, if you're fortunate to do that, and you go to the East Room, this plaque is hanging on the East Room wall. John Adams quote, the day he moved into the White House. Ben Franklin, the most well-known American in the world. He was a writer, a printer, a publisher, an inventor. He was in scientific communities all over Europe. He spent 20 years in London lobbying for the colonies. And in fact, he got kicked out of London in 1775 after Lexington and Concord, and he arrives back just as the Continental Congress starts meeting. So they appoint him to the meeting. Most famous of all the founders, delegate to the Continental Congress. Then he became minister to France. After that, he came back to Pennsylvania, was their 6th governor. They called it president at that time. And then he was also at the Constitutional Convention. So he was one of the 6 people that signed both the Declaration and the Constitution. And he died in 1789, I think. Ben Franklin, what did he believe about religion? You probably heard people say Ben Franklin was a deist. Well, what's a deist? That's somebody who believes that there is a God who created the world, cast it off, and doesn't care about it anymore, doesn't pay any attention to it, left it all alone. Well, here's what he said about religion. If men are so wicked with religion, what would they be like without it? In 1749, he proposed for Pennsylvania that history will afford frequent opportunities of showing the necessity of a public religion and the excellency of the Christian religion above all others. He is also the guy who, at the Constitutional Convention, said, we've been meeting for 10 days and we can't solve anything. Have we forgotten that we used to pray every day in this room? And do we think we're now so great we don't need to realize God anymore and we should pray? And so they started at the Constitutional Convention in 1787 praying, and that continues to this day. We pray in Congress every day, just like we pray here tonight. A deist wouldn't believe in prayer. So Thomas Jefferson was one of the youngest, lawyer, scientist, banker, brilliant man, probably the smartest man in the colonies at the time, or most educated. He was at the College of Women where he met Patrick Henry. Of course, he was in the room when he made that speech. He practiced law in Virginia. He actually defended 7 runaway slaves in the early 1770s and got 2 of them acquitted. Now, Jefferson owned slaves, Washington owned slaves, a lot of the Southern plantation owners owned slaves, which they all inherited. They all spoke out against it. That's a whole other presentation I can give you. They all spoke out against slavery. They just couldn't figure out how to end it. And I'll show you what happened in a few minutes. He was a member of the House of Burgesses, saw Patrick Henry make that speech. 33 years old, then he writes the Declaration. He's the second governor of Virginia, and then he was Minister of France, Secretary of State, second vice president, third president. And of course, responsible for the Louisiana Purchase also. If you go to the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., around the top there are quotations, and there are 4 huge panels in 4 quadrants. And on those panels are things written, like 3 of the 4 are all about God. God who gave us life, gave us liberty. So liberty, freedom comes from God. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we remove the conviction that these liberties are a gift of God? They are not a gift of government, they are a gift of God. Roger Sherman, lawyer and Superior Court Justice, that's the Supreme Court of Connecticut. He believed in peace with Great Britain. In fact, he authored what was called the Olive Branch Petition. He was the only person to sign all 4 documents, the Continental Association, Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. Then he served in the U.S. Congress, and he served as a U.S. Senator. Robert Livingston from New York was the Chancellor of New York, which is like these, it's not the Secretary of State, it's the guy who, the Attorney General, okay, Attorney General, I thought it was like the money guy, like you. No? Okay. He held the Bible and administered the oath of office to George Washington. He was minister to France, and so he, under Jefferson, so he negotiated the Louisiana Purchase, and then later he became a partner with a guy named Robert Fulton, developing the steamboat. He was in that business. Yeah. So those are the 5. They write this thing up, and what is in the Declaration? What is in it? And I recommend that you all read it out loud with your families before July 4th this year. It takes 15 minutes to do it. There's 4 basic sections. The first section is called the preamble. The second section that explains government and the rights. We're going to just show you quickly what these are. Then the third section, the biggest section, is all the grievances that they had with the king. And the 4th section is we're separating. It's over. We're done. Okay? And then the signatures. So the preamble, when in the course of human events, basically it says when rulers violate the God-given rights, the people have a right to separate from those rulers, but they have to explain why they're separating. So that's what we're doing here. That's the first sentence of the Declaration. Okay? Then you go to what is government supposed to be. Okay? All are created equal and are granted rights by the Creator. No government can take those rights away. Government receives its power to govern from the people. We give it to them. And government's role is to protect those rights. So that's written in the second, that's their description of how government should operate. When government fails to do this, it's the right of the people to change the government. Again, this has never been seen before in the world. Okay? There were 27 grievances. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can read through the Declaration. You'll see them. They blamed the king for everything. He has done this. He has done that. He has done this. Here are some of the things they blamed him for. They took away the ability to pass laws. They can't pass their own laws. The king is not passing the laws in Parliament. We can't elect our own representatives. The king is appointing people to rule over us. We can't choose our own judges. The king is choosing those judges. We can't have a trial by a jury of our peers. In fact, if you had a serious crime, they sent you to England to be tried by people over there rather than people in the colonies. We can't trade with other countries. Not only couldn't you buy tea, you had to buy tea from the crown, because the crown owned it, the king owned the East India Tea Company. You couldn't buy wine, you couldn't buy clothing, everything had to come from England. You couldn't trade with Portugal, couldn't trade with Italy, couldn't trade with any other country. The king could put soldiers, you know that nice bedroom you sleep in, Mark? The king, the governor would say, you sleep on the back porch because the captain is sleeping in your bed. Okay, so they put soldiers in people's homes all over. And of course, no taxation without representation. You've heard that. But there's 27 of these grievances. And then there's actually was one more. I'll tell you about that one in a second. Then there's the statement of separation. The 13 colonies are no longer associated with the king. We're now a new nation. And for this, the last line, for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That was very important to them. Their word was more important than anything else. So they present this draft, everybody comes back after 3 weeks, they present the draft on the 28th, and they start debating it, and they start making changes to it for 2 or 3 days, then they set it aside. And then they start the vote, so the debate resumes on July 1st, they made changes to the document, they said, okay, do we really want to do this? And they argued about it for 2 days, and what happened was South Carolina changed their vote to be for independence, and then 2 states, Pennsylvania, they had 6 people, and there were 3-4-3 against, and 2 of them abstained, allowing Ben Franklin to vote for independence. And the same thing happened with Delaware. I lost his name. One of the older gentlemen came back at the last minute and cast the deciding vote for Delaware. So there were 12 of the colonies that voted for it. And New York didn't have any instructions, they were waiting for instructions, so they got their instructions later. So finally, on July 2nd, they vote and the vote goes through. And it's approved. Now, they made some edits to the declaration. What were they? Well, the committee argued about style. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson had a big argument over the word unalienable rights. Because John Adams said there's no such word as unalienable rights. And Thomas Jefferson said, I'm the most educated man in America. There's a word called unalienable. Not quite like that. Actually, Jefferson was wrong, Adams was right. But then, so now we have a word called inalienable. Or unalienable, because they put it in. But it's mostly style changes, not a big thing. The Congress, however, made dozens of changes. They cut it down to half. They cut a lot of things out of it. They did style changes. They did word changes. If you ever saw the John Adams HBO documentary, when they read the Declaration out loud, you see Jefferson leaning up against the wall around the corner, and he's cringing every time they read a sentence that they changed his language. He was very sensitive about his language. They made dozens of changes. The most important change, and the change that allowed South Carolina to change their vote, was this. Jefferson had a grievance of slavery, the 28th grievance. He said he, the king, has waged a cruel war against human nature, violating the most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people, meaning people from Africa, because slavery was a British institution. It was British ships that brought the slaves to the colonies. Those people never offended him, and he is determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He's prostituted his negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or restrain this commerce. So Jefferson wanted that in. He believed that we needed to end slavery, as many of them did. But as he said later, they deleted the debate, and as he wrote about it 20 years later, he said it was struck out to get the compliance of Georgia and South Carolina. So when they took that out, then, and so what the compromise was, okay, first we have to have a country. Once we have a country, we'll figure out how to end slavery. Washington, in his term as president, one time wrote, I wish the Congress would do something to end slavery. But it took 87 years, as you know, to get that done. So they signed it on July 4th. Now, these are the signatures that you see on the original document. But on July 4th, only 2 people signed it. John Hancock, the president of the Continental Congress, and Charles Thompson, who was the secretary. And that's when Hancock signed his name so big that King George would be able to see it when he looked at it. Because Hancock was Hancock, by the way, as a teenager, was working with his uncle. He inherited his uncle's shipping business, one of the richest men in the colonies. And his uncle had him going to school in England. So Hancock was in England in 1763 when King George was crowned, coronation. And he saw all the finery and all the ridiculousness in some cases in his mind of the royalty in England. So the only 2 of them signed it, and they sent it to a printer. The remainder of the 56 delegates all came back on August 2nd to have a formal signing. And when they were there, Ben Franklin, there you see in the center, he said, we must all hang together, or most assuredly we'll all hang separately. Because they were all traitors. The minute they put their names in that document, they were traitors to the king. And the word was out, get these guys. Now, what happened to them? Well, they said, we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. 5 of them were captured and tortured. 9 died from wounds. 2 lost sons. 2 had sons captured. 12 had their homes, businesses pillaged, their farms burned and destroyed. They paid a great price, a lot of them, for the freedom that we owe today, that we have today. Who did not sign the Declaration? For good reason, George Washington was busy prosecuting the war, so he wasn't there. He was there initially, but then before they did the Declaration, he was out fighting the war. Patrick Henry didn't sign because he went back, before they got to the debate, he was called back to Virginia to be the first governor of Virginia. And therefore, somebody else took his place at Congress. Because they kind of fed in and out of the Congress through time. Alexander Hamilton was in the military aid to Washington, he didn't sign. James Madison, the fourth president, did not sign because he was also a captain in the artillery. In fact, he was wounded at Trenton, Washington crossed the Delaware. So these people did not sign for all good reasons. Nobody opposed it. They just didn't sign. They weren't there for signing. On July 5th, the Congress, John Hancock, orders the local printer in Philadelphia, John Dunlop, to print 200 copies. There are 26 of these copies in existence today. I don't really know who owns them. Pretty sure that Ross Perot or the family owns a couple of them. I know they had a few of them. You see down at the bottom there, signed by John Hancock and Charles Thompson. They couldn't duplicate the signatures because we didn't have photographic process yet. So those are printed, and John Hancock has them sent out to all the various colonies and to all the various military commanders. And then, so the Declaration arrives on July 8th. They ring the Liberty Bell, and everybody gathers in Liberty Square, and a guy named John Nixon, the captain in the army, reads the Declaration out loud to the people gathered there outside Liberty Hall. On July 9th, the Declaration arrives in New York City, where George Washington is preparing to defend Long Island and Manhattan against the British invasion. And so he calls all his soldiers all gathered around the New York area and has the officers read the Declaration to all the soldiers. There's great rejoicing in New York. The people are celebrating and setting off fireworks. And unfortunately, or fortunately, they tear down the statue in front of the Commerce House at the southern end of Manhattan of King George, and they melt it down into cannonballs. And George Washington writes in his diary that night, "I wish they hadn't done that," because he hates mob rule. He says, "I wish they hadn't taken it into their own hands. I wish they would let the officials make the decision about tearing down the statue." But it happened, and that's what they did. The Declaration reached London in August. It was printed in the newspaper. It said, "King George is not amused." So since 1776, over 100 statements of independence from kingdoms have been made all over the world, modeled after the language of the Declaration of Independence. 31 of those have happened since 1989. So our form of government now has in some way or other been imitated all around the world. On January 1777, Congress commissions Mary Catherine Godwin in Baltimore. She's a printer. She also happens to be the postmaster of that area. And she and her brother, but her brother really didn't run the business. She ran the business. And she took it on herself to print this treasonous document under orders from Congress. And that's what her version looks like. And I think it says in the notes there that there's 9 of these that still exist that we know of. So she printed, I don't know how many copies, but 9 still exist. And you can see there at the bottom it says printed by Mary Catherine Godwin. So the declaration that we see today, if you go to the National Archives, if I'm not mistaken, this is the Declaration, this is the Constitution, and that's the Bill of Rights. The one you see today, and the one that's often printed with all the signatures, probably didn't come into existence, I don't know the exact date, but the late 1800s, early 1900s, when they could take a photograph of it. And they don't allow that. If you've ever been to see it, it's under protected glass, and it's really hard to see because it's kind of faded. So that's why you don't see the signatures on those earlier versions. Okay. Now, is this declaration relevant today? I would say so. How should we look at it? We should look at it exactly how they wrote it. Because all those principles, that's why I advise you to read it, because all those principles still apply today. In fact, I would bet you'd be a little surprised when you read some of those grievances and you look at what's been happening in our country, that you say, hey, wait a minute, that's not what they intended. So go ahead and read it and view it that way. How should we respond? I've got a couple ideas for you. Number one, read it out loud. Make sure your children and your grandchildren read it. Okay. Secondly, live up to it. Embody the principles of it. Okay. They wanted a better country for everybody, and they did everything they could to get it that way. And it's up to us to keep it going. And thirdly, get involved in your local politics. We got a big election coming up, but you know what happens in Austin, and a lot of those things are pretty much written in Texas already with the national election and the state elections, but it's your local governments that are important. Get involved in the school board in Sherman and in McKinney and in Carrollton and any place else. Because that's where the future leaders are coming from. And if you watch, I just happen to live in Carrollton for over 20 years, and I watched a guy named Kenny Marchant, who used to be one of the biggest builders in Carrollton. And then he would go to the city hall every week, every month to get his permissions and things. Got involved, he became the mayor of Carrollton, then he became a state representative, then he became a representative in Congress. Because he was at the city, when was the last time you went to the city hall meeting? They have it every month. And the politicians would love to see you there voicing your opinions, because they want to know what you think. So get involved in local politics, very important. That's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thanks for your attention. And let's honor July 4th, the Declaration of Independence. I do have a website on Facebook, Untold Stories of American Independence. I have a YouTube channel where I put some of these stories, and I'm putting more up, so please feel free to join me there.
Time for a question or two, anyone?
Carl, I just noticed that several of those gentlemen, the five, were ministers to France. Is that?
France was our friend.
Yeah.
And so from France, they would, John Adams went to Amsterdam and tried to get the Dutch to give us a loan. They went to Russia, so France was kind of the jumping off place, because the French would protect them. Because one of them was captured on the ship. In fact, John Adams and the ship he and his son took across was fired on by a British ship, but they avoided it somehow. So I think France was just was the seat of the other power in Europe, even though it was royalty.
The others? Okay, Carl. Giving you everything the SER can give you, except another certificate of appreciation. So, got you this one, Carl Flowers, in recognition of his support to the McKinney chapter, Sons of the American Revolution, by presenting the program, the Declaration of Independence, the chapter meeting on this day, May 16, 2024. Remember that? Put something in the envelope, picture. Yep.
Thank you.
Carl, would you flash that last,
Oh, yes.
screen
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna take a picture of that.
Oh, sure.
Where did it fall? Where? Oh, here it is. Okay, got it.
Some of the information's on the handout, but now.
It actually is. Like, here. There.
Oh, it's the bottom of the handout.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the handout. But see, if you just go to YouTube and go Untold Stories of American Independence, or Facebook Untold Stories of American Independence, or just become my Facebook friend. Oh, Facebook friend, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Somebody did. No. Yeah. Everybody got it? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, let me do one thing here right quick. Right out here. I'm gonna pull this off. Hold my hand. Here, second.
What's that? Yeah.
There, all right.
Bingo.
Bingo. Okay.
You lost it, Tom.
Was that permitted?
Did it fall off?
Okay. Okay, so, next on the agenda, we moved this up a little bit because we know we got a couple here. Are y'all through with school or is this the last week? Tomorrow is the last day in Frisco for school. All right, well, and Wes back here, Wes is her teacher in history, by the way. Wes is back there grinning really big, so, it's done now. Anyway, so it's not working, okay, hold on. It's thinking, okay. Well, anyway, so, the next thing on the agenda, we're going to try to pull this up apart because we know y'all probably want to go get a good night's sleep in case they give you a test tomorrow, right, guys? Well, I've got somebody smiling back there. Anyway. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is, we're gonna present the, if I can get it there. Oh, yeah, all right. Click the, this went away. What is that? Oh, well. Well, I was gonna show them your brochure, I'll put it all up on the screen, but anyway. So basically, we're gonna present the Sergeant Moses Adams Memorial Middle School Brochure Contest Award winner for the McKinney chapter. This is an award that's given to middle school students. They're asked to do a threefold brochure talking about some specific topics. And Elena did that, and our teacher, Wes Brown, turned them in to me, and turned in a handful of them to me, right? And we decided that hers was the best one. So Elena, would you come up here, please? Thank you. Okay. Let me get the paperwork here. It just doesn't want to. Well, that beautiful work I did. It's already gone. Oh. Okay, so, anyway, so we what we have here is we have a certificate. The important thing, you don't have to fall. Certificate of appreciation, it says Elena M. Chow. I'm sorry, it's a certificate of merit. We have a certificate of merit, McKinney chapter, winner, the Sergeant Moses Adams Memorial Middle School Brochure Contest, Texas Sons of the American Revolution. You hold this, you can hold one side, I'll hold the other. Yeah, okay. And then on the back, we have stick it on here, a check for, tell them how much it is.
$100.
$100. All right. We're gonna get the family up here in a minute too, but. Paying for dinner? I don't know, you'll have to ask her that, I don't know, I doubt it. Oh, I guess, okay, so at this point, I want to turn the microphone over to Tracy Pounders. Tracy is the Texas State President of the SAR. I can get that close, right? Close. Okay, so he wants to give you something also. We get to keep that. I'm going to step back out of the way.
Well, Elena, I just want you to know how important it is to our local chapters that we have students like you participate in this. I want to thank you so very much on that. But you do know that by winning here, you competed at the state level also. So wait, there's more. We have a certificate here. This is from the state society. And this is, you won third place in the state. And there were a bunch of these guys. And it was a tough competition on here. So I'm wanting to present to you this certificate of merit for this from the state society on this. And there's also something paper clipped in here. Would you like to see what is there?
$150.
I'm gonna get with her. Okay. Well, they're probably Thank you. Oh, you want, oh, I know, you're gonna put, I know you're gonna do that. Okay, don't let, they want to take pictures. Don't get any pictures. Okay, oh, well, listen. Hey, Wes, parents, come up here, and parents, oh, gotta come up here.
Important people.
That's right. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, great picture.
Thank you.
And your first one, it should be, let's make sure I got that video, same in this one. Okay, I got your. Sorry, Bob. Oh.
Oh, yeah.
I know I had some. Congratulations, thank you. Y'all are welcome to stay, but I know last day of school, you'll probably have trouble sleeping, right? It's not like Christmas, is it? I know it's not like Christmas. Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Really, we were really impressed with her, obviously, since state level, first place. So anyway, really proud of her. Okay, what do we got next here? Let's see. Oh, back to you, right? Yeah. Yeah, we'll do this and then we'll do that. Great.
All right, wonderful. So our next meeting is June the 20th, 2024, and we have upcoming events on the back cover. I'll quickly run through some of those. We have the Audie Murphy Day in Farmersville, June the 15th at 8:30. If you're a veteran, I think they serve breakfast over there, if I remember correctly.
They do. Yes.
Some markings for graves of patriots, June the 1st. Should be 2 of those, 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. May 24th, the citizenship ceremony at UTD Alumni Center, where the color guard will be. And at this time, are there any other announcements from the floor?
All right. I got a question on.
Yes, sir.
On the grave markings.
Yes.
Is one of these gonna be a bigger event than the other, or?
That's a good
you know?
question. Does anyone know?
What is it?
The grave markings, is one of the grave markings going to be a larger turnout expected than the other grave marking, or does anyone
I have
know?
no idea. They're gonna last about the same time, about 30 minutes.
Good question.
Well, we did the one here at the cemetery, it lasted about 22 minutes long.
Is one a larger presentation than the other, like the color guard's gonna be at one and not the other, or?
No, we're having exactly the same.
Okay.
The nice thing about it is neither one of the patriots have ever been recognized in Texas before.
Anybody else? Okay. All right, at this time, we will have a new member induction ceremony. And I'd ask Andrew Milwee and Bob, each come up, please. All right, compatriot Andrew Scott Milwee, do you, as a descendant of one of the patriots, the heroes of the American Revolution, reaffirm your ancestors' faith in the principles of liberty and our constitutional republic? And will you pledge to support the National Society of the Sons of the American Revolution?
Yes.
I now take great pleasure in presenting you your membership certificate. And your father will pin you with the rosette. Brother, I'm sorry.
There's a story here. The story in a minute.
You want to get that $100 next? Your brother, excuse me. This rosette is the official recognition of the emblem of the Sons of the American Revolution. Its blue and buff colors represent the colors in the uniform worn by General George Washington, wear it proudly. Compatriot Andrew Scott Millwee, we welcome you to the McKinney chapter. We ask you to work with us to fulfill the purposes and the objectives of the Sons of the American Revolution. At this time, we'd like to invite you to address the members, present your thoughts, but first we'll have your brother, Bob Penny.
You can do it with a slam on the chest without the back. Draw a little blood that way, you know.
Make sure it goes with all,
Yeah, right.
the stick on.
Good.
If you have any thoughts,
Any thoughts?
comments.
I appreciate it. I'm very honored.
Well, okay, so before they leave, you need to, in front of this whole group, talk about what you wanted for your birthday, Fred.
Oh.
Give him the microphone. Okay, color guard guys, listen up now.
I used to ask my brother to be in a parade with me, so we went through the process of getting into the SAR, and now he's gonna do the Audie Murphy parade.
There you go. In uniform.
Would y'all, all the members, please welcome Andrew.
Yeah. Think you can,
So
oh, he's got the paperwork.
I've got paperwork, but I'll get to you right from the. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we have many public service commendations and.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, one of the things this organization does is recognize our public service people with commendations. We call them, well, sometimes we call them awards, or really commendations for what you do for us, okay? It's one of the things we like to do because, you know, you're watching out for us every day. And so this is one of the things that we're going to focus on. So with that, we've got a couple that we're going to give out tonight. And we're fortunate enough to have Jim Floyd, who's Assistant Chief Administrator for the McKinney Fire Department. He's going to come up and read basically how this works is we say, here's what these medals are and what the requirements are to give these medals. We turn that over basically to the chief of the fire department chief. And we just say, you pick who you think's right for each one of these. And then, so that's how that process went. So basically, your chief picked you two, okay? So with that, I'm gonna turn it over, and Jim's gonna read these, and then I'm going to hand them the medal and certificate and shake your hand. So with that, there you go.
Thank you, Tom. First, I want to express the gratitude that the McKinney Fire Department has for your organization doing this for us. Mark, thank you. Tom, thanks much for all I know. It's a hard act to follow. It was great. It's a great talk. Really enjoyed that. Seriously. There's two awards here that that we're fortunate to pass out to our members. The first one is the Fire Safety Combination Medal. I apologize for reading this, but I kind of got through a lot here, so I didn't get a chance to memorize this. The Fire Safety Combination Medal. The Fire Safety Combination Medal is awarded to an individual for accomplishments and for outstanding contributions in the area of fire safety and service. Now, Senior Inspector Doug Leknowski, he's over here. Come on up, Doug. Yep, come on. So, Supervisor, I told him I promised him he would have to say anything, so he may not say anything. So Doug Canfield from the city, he was working with the building. Yeah, so he was, he works for the fire marshal's office as a senior inspector. So he came with a plethora of knowledge from being a building inspector. So it was a seamless transition into the fire marshal's office, and he really helped us a lot. So this is what Doug did to deserve this. He's been a distinguished member of the city and McKinney's team since 2005. In 2020, he transitioned to the fire marshal's office, where he has since become an indispensable asset. Leveraging his extensive expertise in building construction, Doug has significantly contributed to the office's operations. In February 23, he was promoted to senior fire inspector. It's a testament to his proficiency and dedication. Following this promotion, Doug promptly assumed the responsibilities of deputy fire marshal for 6.5 months. He seamlessly managed the position, garnering no complaints and effectively developing and delivering essential training for the division. His positive demeanor, as you can tell, and unwavering willingness to support in various capacities has profoundly enhanced the office's morale and efficiency. His ability to embrace multiple responsibilities concurrently, including becoming a well-rounded fire investigator, underscores his versatile skill set and professional dedication. He completed the Collin County Forensic Fire Death class in September, further enhancing his expertise. He's consistently maintained timely completion of his tasks despite an overwhelming workload, demonstrating remarkable organizational skills and resilience. As one of the most recognizable and friendly faces of the fire marshal's office, which is hard to do sometimes, he has earned the trust and respect of contractors within the city who rely on his assistance and knowledgeable advice. His collaborative efforts with multiple departments foster a dynamic and cohesive environment. Those contributions have played a pivotal role in cultivating a collaborative and dynamic work culture, enhancing both the efficiency and ethos of the fire marshal's office. Doug, thank you for your service.
All right.
Okay, so we got a certificate and a medal. This is a really nice medal that we have here. It says Sons of the American Revolution Fire Safety Commendation. Okay, and assuming your fire chief says it's okay, you can wear it on your uniform if you'd like to. So I'm gonna give you that very nice medal. And then here's a certificate, basically, that goes along with it, the special certificate, signed our commendation award. So thank you so much for what you do for us every day. We really appreciate you. Take your hand, and I'm gonna try to get rid of this for a minute, and you can hold this, and I'll hold one side.
Give me a minute.
Okay.
Shift the boots.
Uh-oh. As long as we want that mode, that makes our face look funny or something, we don't need that.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay.
So the next medal we have is an emergency medical service combination medal, and I'll talk about it. This is going to be for firefighter Chris Muscle. Chris, come up. He doesn't have to speak if he doesn't want to either. So, so this combination medal is presented to an individual for accomplishments and/or outstanding contribution in the area of emergency medical services. The award is intended for paramedics and certified emergency medical technicians and others in the emergency medical field who performed an active service beyond that normally expected. So Chris is he's one of our best firefighter paramedics. He has a lot of experience as a advanced care paramedic, and he demonstrated those skills at one of these calls that was very memorable. Chris also, he was named the firefighter of the year this year at our awards banquet. So he's not coming into this with this is something else he's getting this year. So anyway, it's a big joke for the guy now. So he's getting another award. So this is what this is for. We recommend this award go to firefighter Chris Muscle. Firefighter Muscle is an outstanding paramedic with this organization. He's instrumental in our efforts to train new paramedics as well as those who have been on the job for some time. On May 3rd, 2023, Chris was confronted with circumstances that would test the best of us. Firefighter Muscle responds to a reported vehicle accident on North Highway 5 in McKinney. Crews did not know until their arrival that the accident involved Captain Jamie Graham of the McKinney Fire Department. Captain Graham would later succumb to his injuries. If it were not for the skills Firefighter Muscle possesses in advanced paramedicine, we do not believe Captain Graham would have arrived at the hospital alive. And as a direct result of Chris's advanced skills, Captain Graham's family was able to spend time with him prior to his passing. These types of calls are difficult to manage, but they are especially difficult when they involve one of our own. So this is a very dramatic call for us. But I'm glad Chris was there to take care of it.
Okay, so, we have a surprise here. So after we reviewed this and did that write-up and the whole thing, I called and talked to, or I actually sent an email to your chief, prior chief, and said, if you recall there right at the end, what he did relative to saving the life, okay? So we upped the medal. I hope that, I know now you can tell this story, you know, he's got another one, and you know what they did right in front of everybody, they upped the next level. So because of what you did and ability to at least prolong his life enough so he can spend some time saying goodbye to his family and everything, we decided, and again, with the approval of your fire chief, to up this to a life savings award. And you think life savings, well, he died, but basically our definition of the life savings award, if you did something to basically prolong the life until he got basically either an EMT or made it to the hospital. And that's what it is. So with that, we got that. So anyway, so we're going to give you this medal right here. It's the basically life savings award, the nice medal. And it says here, firefighter Chris Muscle, life saving award in recognition of saving a human life under emergency conditions. So we're going to give that to you. I'm going to hide this mic. And there you go. And we're going to take a nice picture. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, that last bit touched me, so I said, well, I'm gonna make a phone call. Okay. Back to you, Ed.
Okay, the minutes, Carrie posted the minutes to the website. Hope that everybody had an opportunity to review those. At this time, I'd ask if anyone makes any motions concerning the minutes.
So moved.
Bill moves, any seconds? Second by Joe. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Minutes are approved. I'd ask our treasurer, Peter Ford, give us the treasurer's report, please.
All right, so here's the treasurer's report from May 16th, 2024. So at our last meeting, our available funds were $2,160.99. This month, our expenses were $100 to the winner of the SAR poster contest, $100 to the winner of the SAR brochure contest. We had an expense of $212.07, and that was for the frame for Sheriff Skinner's award that we gave out last month. There was a $60 for breakfast, and that was for the winner of the SAR poster contest. And then our income this week, or sorry, this month, was $100 of donations, and those are earmarked for the bottom veterans, and they'll be given to Al for purchasing of gifts. The chapter available funds are now at $1,788.92. We also still have our certificate of deposit that's currently at $5,117.81. It's earning 4% and will mature on September 26th unless we need funds sooner. Any questions? Hearing none.
All right, any business from the floor? Yes, sir.
To put in. So we are doing fundraising for the veterans up at Bonham. And Al Lacey was going to tonight, he's our chairman of our veteran affairs, but he wasn't able to make it. But anyway, I don't know whether y'all know, we've talked about this situation before, but that's primarily like a rehab facility. And there are a lot of veterans up there that are struggling mightily, okay, for whatever their issues. And having gone up there and met some of them, I can tell you that some of them, they really have no family or anything. Okay. So what we try to do is we get a list usually twice, sometimes 3 times a year, to talk about the needs for them that would make their life a little better or whatever, things that are not provided to them. We try to give, basically, try to donate to them. Our chapter has basically, we've decided, I believe it was $250 that they were going to buy things with for this go round. We did some earlier this year, about $240, $140. But anyway, so we're looking for donations. If you wanted, we sent that out in the, basically that went out in the last chapter newsletter. It was the last one that I think not currently. Anyway, and if you would like to donate something, just call me or Al Lacey, and we'll come pick it up if we need to. And then if you'd like to, basically, if you'd like to just give some cash, which we've already got $100, but if you'd like to give some cash, then we just write a check to McKinney SAR, works. You send it to Peter Ford, and again, that information is in the newsletter, and send it to him, and they're going to be taking care of that in June.
Excellent.
Thank you for thinking about it.
Thanks, Tom. Anyone else have additional business? All right, hearing none, we will turn it over to Paul Andreessen for our benediction.
May God Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, bless you and keep you both now and forever, and unto the ages of ages, world without end. Amen.
Amen. If you'll please join me in the processional until we meet again. Let us remember our obligations for our fathers who gave us our Constitution, a Bill of Rights, an independent Supreme Court, and a nation of free men. We're adjourned.
Good job.
Thanks, everyone.